Hello and welcome to CodeRage and welcome to the InterBase Product Address. My name is Stephen Ball. I'm the Associate Product Manager for InterBase and the Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Embarcadero. And today we're going to be going through and having a look at what's been happening with InterBase and what's going to be coming down the road. So today's agenda, we're going to start off with a quick look at what InterBase is doing and have a look at a couple of the interesting stories that we've had from customers who have been using XE7 and have moved on to XE7. And then we're going to get into the meat, really having a look around the roadmap and looking into some of the really interesting things that we've got coming down the line for InterBase. We're going to have a beta that will be opening up later this year as well for our next release, which is going to be Project Big Bang. We haven't given it a formal name yet. That's what we're calling it internally as a working project name. So we'll have a look at Big Bang and also what's going to be coming beyond the release of Big Bang. Some of that may be in updates, so definitely worth having a look and feeding back to us what you're liking and what you're wanting to see more of. At the end of today's session, there will be time for some Q&A, so please do get your questions in, especially on the GoToWebinar control panel if you're watching this live. And then myself and the rest of the InterBase team who will be joining me online will be going through answering some of your questions at that point. So without further ado, let's kind of have a quick look at what InterBase is today and then carry on through. So InterBase, I'm sure hopefully most of you are aware of by now, but InterBase is our embeddable database that you can either embed into your applications as part of your installer. InterBase is its own installer that you can run for Server Edition, which you can silently run alongside your application install as part of it. Or you can deeply embed, so if you're running an iOS or Android application or even Windows and Mac, you can do this on. You can actually have the InterBase libraries as part of your application package, and then as your application starts, the InterBase database will run inside your application, and at the point your application closes, then the InterBase database will go away. Now, the deeply embeddable provides a database for the application to use itself and can also be used as a client driver to connect back to an InterBase server. We have both Windows and Linux 32 and 64-bit server editions, which scale to many hundreds of connections. We also have available upon request Solaris and Mac servers, but they're not normally built and updated unless there's specific demand around those, but they are available as well. Now, InterBase itself, while it's an embeddable database, it doesn't mean it's anything less of a database engine. In fact, it's exceptionally well powered, and there's a huge amount of enterprise level features in there that you'd normally find or expect to find in things like Enterprise SQL Server Edition. So things like transparent data at rest, with your whole database completely encrypted, but when you run your SQL queries that you've got access to the data directly, with the ability to say who can see which data and decrypt specific data, column level encryption, features like journaling and journal archives that allow you to restore back to a specific point in time in case anything has been run accidentally against the database. There's some exceptionally powerful features in there. And in fact, a number of our InterBase customers, in fact, some of our biggest customers don't actually use RAD Studio. They're actually using things like Visual Studio or Xcode or Eclipse to be able to connect back to InterBase. We have some great ODBC, JDBC drivers as well as the native connectivity that is available with ADO.NET drivers as well. Now, some of the other kind of very cool things around InterBase is, we've got over a decade, it's almost like 12-15 years now, of SMP multi-core support, and we'll see later on through the slides that makes a real difference to the speed and performance. That carried along with the journaling capabilities that allows you to ensure that your data is always safe, even if it's processing in memory before it's written to disk. So there's some exceptionally powerful features that come together to offer some huge scalability around InterBase. And adding on to support that are things like database monitoring and statistics that are built in through IB Console, and we're going to be talking a little bit further around some of the new stuff that's going to be coming within Big Ben on that as well. So one thing that we are exceptionally proud about within the InterBase team, since the last CodeRage, InterBase won IoT award for the most innovative use of data, and this was an international award up against some really tough competition, and thanks to the change views feature that we previewed a couple of years ago in CodeRage, we have won this award. If you've not come across change views, I definitely say go and have a look for them. I'll show you where you can find some information on that in a moment. But what change views allows you to do is capture changes to the data, either on a remote InterBase database or on a central one. And when you connect up later on, you can run the same query that you ran before, but then just get the delta back. So it's an exceptionally quick way to be able to fetch the changes and to be able to keep remote data synchronized, and that is a big thing, especially around IoT, especially because of the scalability that change views offers, where normal replication technologies fall out at around about 5 or 6 concurrent servers that are connected and working together. Change views will work to thousands because it has no impact in terms of the database at the server side at the point that you're using them. It's very, very cool technology. But enough about that. We're just really, really pleased to have won that and had some great recognition for InterBase. So one of the things I will say is it's definitely worth, if you haven't visited for a while, going back and having a look at the InterBase website. So you can just type interbase.com or just go to the Embarcadero website and then go to products and then InterBase, and you'll get to the same location. But I'm just going to jump onto the website here, and the one section that I wanted to show you, I'll find where my mouse cursor's gone, is the resources page. So on the resources page, you can see here videos explaining what embedded databases are, some of the IoT challenges and data mobilization challenges. There's skill sprints there for change views, specifically if you want to get in and use that and work with it with FireDAC, some very cool stuff there. There's a video talking about how to take your data from SQL Server or Oracle. We're seeing a lot of people moving from SQL Server at the moment over to InterBase around kind of both cost and the capabilities that InterBase offers. Is quite astounding for them. But also there's a set of videos here just at the bottom in the middle of the screen called InterBase Labs. That's a great place to go and read up some more and see some short videos. We've got some white papers there and some further documentation as well. So definitely a place to go and have a look at. There's also the Compare tab. So if you have a look here under Compare, if you're thinking about what database to choose at the moment, this will give you a bit of information about the InterBase editions and some case studies as well. But then there's also the ISV database comparison here, so notes about what to look at with the database, things to consider, and then some comparisons between different databases, and the chance to read a bit more about SQL Server and FireDAC as well. Firebird as well. So definitely an interesting place to go and have a look through. So before we kind of get in and have a look at the roadmap, I just really wanted to share a couple of fun customer stories that we hear back here. If there's other stories that you want to tell us, then please do go ahead and share. It's always great to hear what you guys are doing with the product. But one that's come up in the last year was to do with Spinali Design, and these guys have been winning a lot of plaudits and I believe some awards as well around their connected bikinis. They're using IoT technologies to be able to collect data through Bluetooth over to a mobile device, and that's being synced into an InterBase database on the mobile. And then if they've been there for too long in the sun, the application is then kind of alerting them that it's time to top up their sun cream. It's doing that using UV radiation monitoring. So some pretty kind of cool use of tech. I believe there's even a Valentine's Day edition which kind of sends a message to your partner to help you top up the sun cream or something like that. But that's kind of a really fun use of InterBase. So one other one that kind of really stood out for me was to do with Electrolux, and these guys are using InterBase to go inside some of their CMIS systems, and it's kind of pretty cool. The engineers turn up at these laundries. It's on their high-end machines, and they're able to plug in and get analytical data straight back out of these machines using InterBase, and then kind of collect and move that data around as well. So it's absolutely kind of vital for the health and the well-being of these machines, that they're well monitored. And you know, having an embeddable database that you don't need to worry about having a DBA on site as well is kind of a pretty key feature here, and that's one of the reasons why InterBase is so well used globally with them. So I've kind of given you a quick couple of stories around InterBase and InterBase to go, specifically with the Electrolux one. And just I wanted to take a quick moment just to alert you to a promo that we do have running at the moment. And if you buy a 50 or unlimited user server license for InterBase, we are providing a license file that will allow you to get unlimited usage and use it commercially of InterBase to go through to the end of 2017. So right up to 2018, you're going to have the ability to use InterBase to go for free, and that will then run through to that point. If you decide you want to keep with InterBase from that point onwards, then you just need to license what you want to keep. But that's an exceptionally, think of it as an exceptionally long trial that you can commercially deploy and use without even having to worry about any restrictions around it. It's there for you to absolutely go nuts on. So I wanted to kind of share one other story that I really do kind of quite like, and that's again a customer who's been a long time InterBase customer who's actually now moving out onto the mobile as well, and this is to do with electronic health records. This is Management Plus. Now they do a lot of work within the eye care industry within the US, and InterBase enables them to come to market safely with their data, 256-bit AES strength encryption, which is what's required for the storage of patient data. And they're a small development team. They're not a big team of developers working. They haven't got a full-time DBA headcount, but InterBase is there because it does what it needs to do. It allows them to focus on their core business. Because they're a VAR, they're able to deploy it out at a bundled license cost to their customers, so it's very, very easy for them just to deploy it out and get it going, and then they just work with us on the royalties afterwards. So if you're interested in the VAR program, then we do have that available, and that's definitely worth touching base with your local sales rep about. I hope you found those customer stories enlightening. We're going to be looking at some more of those through the course of CodeRage, but not in this session today. And it's really now time to have a look at what we're doing in the near and the longer term future with InterBase. So before I do get into that, I just want to kind of quickly reflect on our previous roadmap. Now we had a whole load of things that we promised to bring you and deliver back in 2014. We tend to work on around about a 2-year release cycle with InterBase, because by the time we got the stuff out to market and for you guys to settle in and test and update your databases and work through, we know that kind of takes longer than updating your RAD Studio version. Last time through, we promised 64-bit support for Linux. That was delivered. We promised on enhancing the character set management for new databases. Again, that was being delivered through. There's also, we had this larger transaction ID support brought in, and that's pretty key for InterBase being able to run for a lot longer without backup and restore. Some of our larger customers, and in fact one of the databases we use internally here, can run out of transaction IDs if you're using exceptionally heavily in just around about a month to 2 months for some customers. For a lot of customers, you'd never notice it. We're literally talking about tens of thousands of transactions a day, and you're going to run into hitting the maximum transaction number. Well, we changed that from an integer through to a 64-bit, and we now could run probably for about 150 years before you'd run out of transaction IDs, which is pretty awesome. So yeah, that's kind of delivered with good reason. We also added in some change tracking, which we mentioned to about change views, and has become subsequently the award-winning feature of InterBase. We delivered much faster data dumps, which allowed us to push the data out into a read-only copy of the database, ready for use if you ever have a need to move from your primary database to a backed up version. And data dumps is a great way to do that, and they're incremental. We had the embedded client driver that we promised to deliver. Well, not only did we deliver an embeddable client driver, we actually delivered IBE Lite, which gives you 100 meg of on-disk usage and storage as its own database engine, as a cut-down version of InterBase To Go for free for you to use on Windows, Mac OS and Android. We've also updated some of the demos within the RAD-Studio SVN and moved to a new searchable .wiki. So if you haven't seen it, .wiki.embarcadero.com, you'll be able to see there's an InterBase one there, and you can search through all the online documentation rather than having to sift through the different PDFs that we had before. Now in this section, obviously we are talking about our roadmap. Roadmaps are always subject to change. Nothing here should be taken as being something that's going to be in the final product. That's our normal disclaimer that we have to provide. But we will show you some of the really cool stuff that we are working on. So really looking today, we've had quite a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes with InterBase, and we've had quite a big focus around some of the SQL features that we're going to bring into the Big Bang release. There's also been, as always, attention to the core engine, making sure that we can get it running faster and more optimal against more and more use cases that people provide us and come back through on. And that's paying a real dividend in terms of the performance numbers that we look at and we see release after release within InterBase. We've also been working on a big update to the performance monitoring to enable server-wide performance monitoring. So rather than just being able to monitor a specific database, we're actually taking this to the server level now, so you can monitor the entire server and however many databases you've got running on there, which is a major enhancement to the server monitoring. We're also having a look at new platform support. So there's been a number of platforms updated and released out with mobile and desktop. So I know Android and iOS are regularly updating their versions, and Windows, we've had Windows 10 and the anniversary update. InterBase has been certified and verified for each of those platforms as it's come up. We're very active in terms of the pre-release versions of those and making sure everything's looking good. And then as soon as we get the shipped copy, we rerun our test suite, which normally means within 2 or 3 days we have certification announced as well for those platforms. So all the latest mobile on Android and iOS, and Windows and Mac are fully supported with InterBase. Now we are looking at adding to the InterBase To Go the Linux version as well. So InterBase To Go will be moving on to Linux as a supported platform within Big Bang. Now, moving on beyond Big Bang, there's a number of additional things that we're looking at, partly due to customer demand and some through other use cases that we're looking at driving in. But one of the big things that we're looking at is the auditing level. Now, you can currently roll your own auditing using triggers within the database, and by doing specific logging within stored procedures and so on. That is quite time consuming and takes a fair bit of effort. We're actually looking to build a very powerful auditing tool that will allow you to go beyond the scope of what you can do with traditional trigger-based logging as well. We also have a number of things under review for using some of our existing technologies, but to be able to help scale out and load balance across multiple servers with InterBase. That's a kind of a key thing that we're having a look at as well. And again, we've got a number of next phase speed ups that are planned, ready to going into follow on from a Big Bang release. Now we also have a number of bits around change views. We've got a number of bits that are being reviewed around enhancing IB console. We've given it a lick of paint in terms of adding the VCL styles, and there's been a number of new features added to it, with performance monitoring and other things over the years. But we are having a look at a major uphaul to IB console coming through, and obviously as things are changing, we do need to keep our drivers updated, and that's something that we're having a look again at around post Big Bang. So let's have a quick discussion about some of the SQL features that we have coming in with Big Bang. So one of the key things we're looking at is something that I know a lot of you have asked for in the roadmap, in the focus groups, and in our surveys that we put out. They both came in pretty much in the top 5 for the last 2 or 3 years, and that's around derived tables and common table expressions. So they are in essence feature complete already to go into the beta. So we're looking forward to you having a play with those. We also have a new method added for Truncate Table. Now, Truncate Table basically allows you to delete the contents of a table much faster than the delete command would allow. And this is especially poignant if you've got millions of records and if you've got tables that are referencing each other and so on. So, the Truncate is an exceptionally fast way to remove the data. Some of the database scenarios that we've been provided back by a customer in the past, where it's taken a couple of minutes to remove the data because they've had multiple tables that are all interlinked between each other with tens of millions of records in tables. It's been done in a couple of seconds rather than a few minutes. So Truncate Table is exceptionally fast at removing data out of the way if you need to do that way. There's also some additional kind of transaction wait time enhancements, some execute isolation level benefits that are being brought in, as well as some iSQL scripting enhancements that allow you to run additional things through SQL when you're running kind of batch commands against the database. So let's have a quick look at a few of these. So I mentioned derived tables are very popular in terms of feature requests that we do have, and especially growingly now that we have more SQL Server developers who are moving over to InterBase. But I think the best way to think of a derived table, if you're not used to them, is a little bit like a view. So traditionally, a developer would have to run this, create view, entry-level job as select, and then the select statement for the view. Which is limiting only the records that have a max salary that's less than 50,000. Now once that's created, you can then run a select statement against the view, and you only get back the data that is for the view, which is limited by the where clause. Now you can do union joins and other kind of things within a view. You can do the same things with derived tables though. So with a derived table, you don't need to create that permanent database entity in the first place. So this gives the developer a much more expressive flexibility around the queries that are putting together. You don't need to wait on the DBA to go and do something. You can just say, well, I need to do this with this way. So you can create kind of this ad hoc table, which is derived from the other information, your derived table, and then work with it. So you could say, for example, select job code, job title in the same way you would do from a view. And then instead of saying from a specific view, you say from, and then you have the select statement for the view. And then you define just the as statement that you would do here to define the table prefixes if you're using them. So that's an incredibly flexible way to be able to create a select statement or do something without actually having to have the view created in the first place. But we also have at the end here, we have this with statement. So we can say with, and then the derived table that we're going to call it, and then as, and then we define in essence what the view would be in the past, and we can then run statements based on it. So we have the select job code, job title from ELJ, for example, as a statement. So this is a great way of being able to define it once and then be able to reuse it. Now I want to actually have a look at a real example that you can run on any InterBase database. So I want to find out how many tables I have that have a number of fields in them, and this is one way of being able to do it. So we have here a select statement that is going to fetch back the relation. So this is going to be kind of the table name, and the number of fields, which is going to be our field count. And we've got a SQL join happening between the relations and the relation fields tables, and we're then going to group by the relation. So that will give us the table, number of fields per table. Once we've got that, we then want to actually take the number of fields per table and take the answers and then work out how many tables we have with that number of fields in them. So not something you can do up front. You can say, right, I want to count all my fields together. I could order them, but you can't then say how many you've got of each one within the same statement. And that's something you can do here with the derived table. So let's go ahead and actually have a look at this statement broken down. So here's the inside part. So select the relation name as relations and then the count as field count. So we can see our two fields that have been returned back in our SQL statement here. And if we just run that, we see that data come out. I'm going to just jump back here though, and here's the full statement. So here we are, we're selecting the field count. So we're going to use the field count now, and we're going to count the number of field counts for each one. So we can see here we've got country and employee project have 2. Have we got any more that got 2? We can see we've got one that's got 28, 25, and so on. So if we go ahead and run this, we can now see we've got there's 4 that have got 2 in there. If we scroll down, we'll be able to find that we saw one with 28. In fact, there was 2 that had 28 and one that had 63. So this is a really powerful way, as I say, using derived tables to be able to define almost an inline view. It almost kind of a little bit reminds me of having an anonymous method within the kind of the Delphi world, and that being so flexible and powerful, and they've become things that I've absolutely loved using. So this is a great feature to be adding into the InterBase language. Okay, I also want to kind of just talk a little bit about the Truncate Table capabilities that are coming in. I say this is a much faster alternative to the delete statement, and you run it just by saying Truncate Table and then the table name, but there's then 2 different optional parameters that you can pass on. Now the first one is immediate or deferred. Immediate runs it there and then, and it will lock the table for you, and that will go straight in. Deferred will actually do the same thing, but it will defer it till the end of the queries that you're running. So if you know you have things that need to run in order, the deferred one you can use to actually say, right, I'm going to run with some stuff, and at the end I'm going to just wipe the table out. So you can say up front, at the end, empty the table. So you may be putting a whole load of data in, you may want to be doing specific stuff with it, but at the end you want to empty the table out of the way, where you can do that using the deferred option. We then have restrict and cascade. Now restrict will stop the truncate table running if there's reliances on the data from elsewhere. Cascade will say, well, you've got reliances on this data elsewhere, So by deleting the data here, we need to cascade this elsewhere into the database as well. Now, Truncate Table will honour the foreign key constraints and everything that's set up. That's the default, is to restrict. So if you have something set up that automatically cascades, then restrict will do that. But cascade will actually say, well, this stuff's used elsewhere and elsewhere and elsewhere. And to save you having to work out the order to get all this stuff gone, we will just say, right, if this needs to go and truncate the data from another table for something else, we'll go and do that bit as well. Okay, so let's have a quick look at a truncate example. So I'm going to run this from iSQL. I've just got a little command here. I'll just go run, and we'll go and actually have a look through the through what's happened here. So we just set up and we're using a local database. Just talked a little bit in here about the different options. We can see here the structures that we just spoken about. Here there's some immediate data that's just added to the database. So we have a solo table and a solo self-reference table. And the self-reference table references itself as a foreign key. And then we have a primary table and a foreign key table, just with data across them. So the first one we're going to have a look at here is just using the data that's been added. We can see here that we've got 1 record in the solo table and 4 in the self-referencing table. And if we truncate the solo table, then we can see that the data then removes after we run the next select. If we run the truncate self-referencing table, and then it's just easily removing the data from itself. Now, the other thing that you might notice in here is kind of these dash dash. This is a new comment type that you can use, and I'll explore that a little bit more. If you're wondering what that is, we've always had the traditional start and end block, as you have here. We also have now this new referencing type within Big Bang that will allow you just to do a dash dash to comment the rest of the line out, or to just put a single line comment in. Okay, so that's using truncate instead of delete. I'm just going to run another option. And this is the truncate cascade. So let me just open up the truncate cascade here. We use this lovely friendly text editor. So here we're just going to do a select from the primary table and the foreign key table. We're going to do a truncate, and we're going to see what happens there. Now we're going to do, if we do the truncate on the primary table, there's a constraint on the foreign key. It's not set to, obviously it's a foreign key, so you can't tell it to cascade that. But we'll do the count, we'll see the status is the same, and we'll then use the cascade option, which will then say, okay, well, we need to actually remove the data that cascades throughout the database using this. So with great power comes great responsibility, but that is what we're going to have a quick look at here. So if we just go ahead and run now, again we can see originally the primary table was 4, foreign key we got 2. The initial truncate, because of the foreign key constraint, we're getting the violation error because of the foreign key, which is correct. We can see the data is still then in place. We then run the truncate with the cascade on. At the point we then run the select statements afterwards, it's then cascaded through, because that's an option that you do have to be able to just say, look, I need to just get this data out of the way, wherever it is, whatever it's referencing into it, just clear it out of the way. So that's a very, very powerful, but something you need great responsibility feature to use. Okay, so let's have a look at the final one that we have here. And this is the truncate deferred. So with truncate deferred, what we're going to do is we're going to select the total of records from the solo self-referencing table. And we're then going to do a truncate table, but using the deferred command. We'll then be able to see that the select statement is going to be showing data there. And we'll then be able to insert a record. And we'll then be able to run the select statement again. We'll see that the record count has gone up. We then can then do a commit. At the point that we do the commit, and we then do the count from table afterwards, we're going to see a difference between here and here, because the deferred command has been run on the truncate table. So let's clear this out of the way and run. And here we can see through our ISQL prompt the 4 records, and we can see the 4 records here. And we can then insert the record, and we can now see that we've got the 5th record that's been added. And this is post the truncate call. So see, the truncate call is right up at the top here. Even post those, we're seeing the initial data. We're then seeing the inserted data, so you can work with the data. And then at the end of it, we see that we've got a total records of 5. The commit then, when we run again, has now deferred that truncate to after the transaction is completed, and we now have no records left in the table. So again, different use cases, different scenarios, but some great flexibility around truncate as a new language feature that's coming into InterBase. Now, one thing we did mention a little bit earlier was about the great scalability around InterBase, and this is something that we're exceptionally proud of. We've done a lot of benchmark testing against our previous versions, and also we check out against what other people are doing. For example, we've been running the TPC benchmarks against InterBase for a while now, and one of the things that really kind of struck out when we're looking at performance is just how well InterBase scales. If you're not familiar with them, the TPC benchmarks basically are they're simulated warehouse, and the warehouse has a whole load of real live scenario type of queries happening on the database. So you have select statements and inserts and deletes and updates and modifications to the database records. There's a number of tables that have a few million records per warehouse, and the way you test scale is by adding more and more warehouses. We even tested beyond kind of 16, 32 warehouses, was again following the same kind of curve, which was an upward curve for the number of warehouses being added on. And one of the key things we wanted to really share is if you're not using already the journaling features within InterBase, that's something you really should look at if you're trying to improve the scalability of your systems. The best performance you will get is by running things in memory, and journaling allows you to run your data in memory with a journal log. And then if the server goes down before everything's been hard flushed to disk, then as it comes back up, the journal is then activated and replayed against your database engine, against the live database that you've got there, and then brings all the data back up onto the current point before you're then allowed access back into the database. So journaling is one of those features that is heavily used with InterBase, especially in medical, where it can be life and death. If you don't have the blood results of things that have happened, having that kind of security around your data is an essential thing, and InterBase provides that kind of enterprise level capabilities for running a single SQL command on your database that then improve your performance of your database engine and the scale that you can run at in a vast way. So some great performance gains with XE7, even tested against some of the leading open source alternatives. So the next step, if you want to use InterBase and you're not using it already, or if you've got a copy of 10 Seattle 10.1 Berlin installed, then in the IDE just go to Tools, Manage Platforms, and just make sure on the Additional Platforms option that you've got InterBase XE7 Developer Edition ticked, unless you've got a full paid-for version installed. The Developer Edition is pretty complete. The only thing that it doesn't offer is the strongest encryption capabilities, and you do need to restart it every 48 hours. That's not to go in here, but just either reboot your machine or start and stop it through Server Manager. The other thing is you can just do is go to interbase.com and then just use the get started for free and download the trial, or use the free developer edition link on the right hand side of the screen to get the developer edition if you're not using RAD Studio. So just before we wrap up, 2 notes. One is just a reminder of the promo that I mentioned earlier in the session. If you want to get going with InterBase to go and have both change views running on your client devices and back on your server, then you can do that, try it, see how you go with it. You can always switch to IB Lite for free on the client side if you so wish to. But with the 50 or unlimited user license, we're giving you the full InterBase to go free for use for a year, basically through to the end of December next year. So definitely worth checking out and having a play with, especially because of the data encryption that you get at rest on a mobile device, and that's exceptionally important with mobile data. The other thing, as mentioned, we do have an ISV program. If you are looking at distributing InterBase with your applications, becoming a VAR can make life exceptionally easy. You get great support, get access into the product management team. It allows you to even make some money on the InterBase licenses if you wish to resell them alongside your application as a specific line item. I've seen a number of customers who do that. I used to do that myself. Offer kind of a free version of InterBase or a paid-for version, and I was absolutely blown away by the number of customers who actually want to pay for their database licenses to make sure they have the fully commercially supported license behind them, especially when they're running their business applications on it, and especially when you start looking at the security and everything else that comes alongside that. So definitely reach out to your local partners or sales reps if you're interested in becoming an ISV. Now finally, if you are interested in getting involved with the InterBase Big Bang Beta, then please do drop along to www.surveymonkey.com/r/InterBase Big Bang. Please do just go ahead and pop your details in there. There's only a couple of quick questions, just mainly to find out who you are, and then that will allow us then to contact you later on about the beta as it comes live. So thank you for joining us today, and we're now going to be opening up for some live Q&A.